Boy, I can't wait till some of these tribunals, as we've talked about, start happening, Mark. I mean, the lies, the perversion, the corruption. Where do you start with all this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's where do you really start with all this? Like you said, the Lord said a long time ago that time is up for those who are corrupt. I had prophesied that a year or two ago before Trump was ever in office, and that there was going to be military-style tribunals that were coming. That's going to take place. You're going to see all that happen. And, the leadership of this country and the church is literally under judgment. We talk about America's under judgment. No, it's not. It's the systems that are under judgment. The enemy is doing everything he possibly can right now to interrupt, Donald Trump right now, because, again, we go back to some of the previous shows we've done about God has his timeline, the enemy has his. And the enemy's timeline has just been totally, absolutely denied by the Most High God, and they are not liking it. They're pulling out all their weapons of warfare right now. And that's not just against Trump, it's against everyone. I mean, we can go down the list of things that have been happening, through the hurricanes, all kinds of stuff. We had the big storm, they called it the big bomb or whatever that was, the winter storm. It was like a winter hurricane. You're seeing stuff that's never happened before in the history of man. So the enemy's pulling out all of his weapons of warfare right now. They're pulling out all of the weapons of their warfare right now. I mean, look at what happened with the two hurricanes we had, Sheila. We had Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, then we had Hurricane Irma, which the eye of that hurricane came right over my house, which is one of the biggest hurricanes in American history. The Lord showed me, he says, those two storms were generated and steered by man. Now, I know I was going to get gigged on a lot of that stuff, but the point being is that the enemy and witchcraft behind these storms are to a point where it's just they're doing everything they can to attack. It's an all-out assault on man is what it is right now. They've declared war on the people. And, witchcraft is behind the deep state. They're behind the shadow government. They're in the highest form of witchcraft on earth. So it's witchcraft that's behind this. Now, I want to say something to the Army of God about this, because I'm proud of the Army of God, because we stood up to that storm, Irma. Irma could have been a whole lot worse than what it actually was. These forecasters, these weather guys, they know pretty much where these things are going to come in, as far as where they're going to make landfall and stuff. They could not determine where that storm was going to make landfall. It was because it was back and forth, back and forth. And what I believe was happening in the spiritual realm, Sheila, that people could not see, was the witchcraft on one side and God's people on the other. And it was back and forth, this battle in the heavenlies, if you will. And I'm proud of the Army of God for standing up. Prayers from all over the nation, all over the world were going out to the storm, and they were speaking to that storm. That storm could have absolutely obliterated Florida. Florida would have just been decimated, but it did not. It did not do nowhere near the damage they were expecting. So I believe some of that was actually a training run, exercising our authority against the elements. So I'm proud of the Army of God. So I just want to put that out there for the people as an encouragement out there, because God's increasing our authority over the elements, over these things. So we can't be scared to stand up to some of this stuff, this witchcraft that's coming against the president, that's coming against America, whatever the case may be. It's our time to rule and reign in the heavenly places. It's our time to take authority over these things.
Yeah, when a witch is using the elements, no one bats an eye about hearing that. But when we say we have power and authority and dominion over all the earth, well, Christians it's deer in headlights. Christians don't know that because the churches are not teaching that. If a witch is trying to recruit you, Mark, boy, she'd have you learning your dominion the first day. But no, Christians don't even know how to do basic spiritual warfare because it's not being taught. But witches are causing a lot of these storms between HARP and geoengineering and witches and scalar waves. It's a recipe for disaster, but it's not climate change like Al Gore would like you to believe.
Right, and we have the technology to generate these storms, but it's the witchcraft behind it that's absolutely coming up with this technology to do this as well. So you have two things that are going on, the technology and the witchcraft behind that technology. So we have the authority to take this stuff down in Jesus' name, and the Army of God did just that. And I think it was a good training exercise, so to speak, warfare against the elements.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, we better keep up our prayers too, Mark, because especially in the wake of all this, in the increasing urgent dramatic debate about the North Korean missile nuclear threat, Hawaiian nuclear false missile alerts, I don't think that thing we saw there just on the weekend was an accident. That whole Hawaii's ballistic missile false alarm that plunged literally the whole state into panic for almost 40 minutes. I don't think that was pushing the wrong button. I think personally that it was an exercise in predictive programming, which I talk about a lot to, really get the American people psychologically primed for nuclear war. And isn't it funny that it also came just the same day that DOJ was set to unseal the indictments related to Uranium One that late Friday afternoon? So, whether it's smoke and mirrors or beta testing, predictive program, whatever it is, it's pretty strange timing, Mark.
Right. It's strange timing, and again, it's not anything that we can't pray against and take authority over. Again, we've proven that right now, with these weather systems and the technology behind it. We can take authority over that little demon-possessed dictator and, ask the Lord to do whatever needs to be done. Kim Clement prophesied a long time ago, before he died, that he would be taken out from the inside.
Yeah.
Now, God has not shown me anything specific on the Koreas. I just know there's been a lot of people that have prophesied that the two Koreas would become one. Now, you're seeing them in talks right now. You're seeing their military is depleted to a point where he just sent them out scavenging for food the other day, literally, scavenging for food. So, I mean, if we did have to fire a shot at North Korea, if it did come to that, it would be hot, heavy, and quick. It wouldn't last very long. I don't know. I'm not so sure it's going to come to that. I think Kim was right. I think that somebody from the inside is going to end up taking this guy out before it's over with.
Well, speaking of prophecy, Mark, I was thinking about your prophecy of the former president, and isn't it interesting that two of them ended up over the holidays in the hospital, and then come January, I tried to do a report on it, couldn't find nothing on it. And then I found one and I thought, I don't know about these guys. It seemed like a satire site. You don't know what you can trust anymore. It's getting harder and harder to vet headlines nowadays. But I do know one thing. I believe some of your prophecies are going to come to pass in regards to those former presidents, that is, in the very short future.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here working on a prophecy, written prophecy of that I started working on it back in October of 2017, and that's just how the Lord works with me. He gives me little pieces here and there about these five presidents. He started dealing with me about a week or two before they did the Hurricane Harvey relief effort. I don't know if you remember, they went out there for Hurricane Harvey relief.
Yeah.
Well, that was a bunch of garbage, because all that was a platform for them to stand up and attack our sitting president. That had nothing to do with the hurricane relief. Those guys could care less about helping those people out there. These guys have been, these last five presidents that we have right now are they're wicked, period. So the Lord started dealing with me on these guys. And he said, Mark, two will be taken and three will be shaken. And he said, in other words, two will be removed from the face of the earth, and I'm going to shake the other three to the core. And there will be signs. And the three that will be shaken, I believe you're going to see probably, I know one for a fact will go to prison for treason. I think you will probably see two possibly go to prison, and Bush will be very close from going to prison. And that's what the Lord was showing me, that those three would be shaken.
And so you just mentioned you got a bit more of a word on that. Have you got anything else on that, Mark?
Yeah, the Lord gave me, he said, it's called the evil crew of 32. And basically is the Lord saying, woe to these leaders across the nation, including the church right now. God's judgment is literally falling. It's not coming, it's falling right now on these leaders across America and the church, these wicked leaders. And so the Lord is dealing out this righteous judgment, if you will. So it's the evil crew of 32. It talks about where the Lord told me, he said, Mark, I want you to go back and figure out how many years these guys served, because two of them were one-term presidents and the other three were two-term. So it's a total of 32 years. And 32 in the Bible is usually covenant. And he said that covenant that these guys have had with that entity called Baal is fixing to collapse, literally collapse. It's going to be broken when these guys go down. So that's what the Lord's showing right now. And this whole New World Order Illuminati that they've been supporting Baal's house through all of this so-called corruption and stuff like that, all that's going to come collapsing down around them, basically. That's what this is going to be a sign for. But those guys, when they went out there for Hurricane Harvey and they attacked the sitting president, they touched God's anointed. Now, look at those we've talked about before on your show who have touched God's anointed and what's happened. And you are going to see these high-level leaders who have been attacking Trump, who are standing in the way of his agenda. You will see them removed from authority, number one. You will see them go to prison, number two. You will see some of these leaders, including church leaders now, be removed from the face of the earth as well.
3 days after we did our show last time when you were talking about the presidents, I had to chuckle because literally 3 days later, George H.W. Bush was responding after this barrage of sexual assault. I mean, the guy's never been accused of that in his life. And then suddenly a bunch of actresses were accusing him of sexual assault. And even recently, like in his wheelchair, some of these Hollywood actresses. Now, of course, we get this whole Hollywood grope fest makes it very hard to, it's like, what are they covering up with all this? I mean, no, they just don't want to talk about the child pedophilia, the blood sacrifices for these Illuminati Luciferians. But what's really disturbing, Mark, when you have just a litany of this stuff bombarding you, this guy's a pervert, this guy's a pervert, then no one's a pervert, are they?
Well, and that's what I think they're trying to flood the market with a lot of this stuff so that people become numb to it. When the fact of the matter is, I mean, what was the girl he groped in his wheelchair? I think he even admitted he apologized.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know this stuff is true. Look, all this stuff that these guys have been into, Sheila, these 5 presidents, it's going to be exposed for the entire world to see. And this is what I've been saying with these military tribunals that are coming. You know, one of the gentlemen that was interviewed here a while back on Greg's channel, he even confirmed, he's a high-level CIA guy, confirmed that, yeah, there's some tribunals coming, all right. And so these tribunals that are coming, it's going to make Nuremberg look like a cakewalk, because when they start really digging into this, the length, the depth, the breadth of this thing, it is going to be so big, people aren't going to be able to wrap their minds around it. So it's like I tell people again and again, strap in, put your seatbelt on, because we're going to be in for this for years to come. This is going to be going on for years. And again, you know, when you have military tribunals, I think they have a whole different set of rules. You know, when there's no appeals or whatever the case may be. I'm not a legal analyst here, but I mean, I think it's justice is served like right then and there. So I mean, you know, there's not a country on earth that when you commit a treasonous act that in times past it wasn't followed by a death sentence. Even here in this country, it used to be death by hanging.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what they do to these people, I have no clue, because if they start executing some of these people, there's going to be a whole lot of executions going down.
Not just executions, but when you're operating outside the scope of conventional criminal proceedings, you know, they can just cart you off and do whatever they want with you. So
right.
It's going to be fast and furious. I kind of get a sense George Soros, I believe, is coming down very soon. I get the feeling of that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever doubt yourself do you ever start doubting yourself? And how do you overcome that for people out there that are getting prophetic things and are kind of, not sure about what to do with those?
You know, I think the biggest thing for me is that I operate totally different than anybody else that I know of. I mean, there may be other people out there that operate. I just don't know of them. But like when I get a prophetic word, very rare do I sit down and I pen out a prophetic word all at once. God starts giving me these bullet points, and I just start meditating on it, and God starts filling in the blanks. Sometimes it takes weeks. Sometimes it takes months. I started working on this one with the president back in October. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that when you get something, is people are so quick to want to release it, number one, or not to meditate on it and see that if it is truly from God. If it is truly from God, God will begin to start filling in the blanks with things. I think the biggest mistake we make is that we just start spewing stuff out of our mouth, or we just write something down real quick and say, oh, that's from God, and that's it. You know what I mean? They just dismiss it. You know, it talks about in Scripture, it talks about testing the spirits. And that's one way of testing, is knowing, is that, for me anyway, the more I meditate on God, the more He begins to fill in the blanks, the more I know it's Him, so to speak. And it's like, is this from me or is this from you, God? So that's how I know. And I think, but the biggest thing for people is that just don't be so quick to jump and release something saying, oh, I saw a vision when it was a dream, or, oh, I saw this vision in my mind's eye, you know what I mean, or whatever the case may be, and then just release it. Because, I mean, that's what I think where people make some of the biggest mistakes. I think, the other thing is, what kind of a platform do you have? I mean, when I first started, even with the Trump prophecy, when I was here in my house sick for all those years, I just had it handed out to about 5-6 people. That's it. That's all I had. Friends and family. That was it. When God says it's time to release something, He'll release it. Man, when He released the Trump prophecy, He released it. But that was in His timing. I didn't push it. I just happened to hand it to my doctor, and that was it. It took off from there. But there's different levels. I think, you've got, I guess the best way to explain this would be like the local, state, and federal levels, if you will. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same way. You've got a local type of prophetic word, and you've got maybe a state type word, and then a federal level. It just depends,